being passed. Protests are still alive. People took to the streets yesterday in Paris and Bordeaux. 70,000 people in the capital, according to police. 500,000 say organisers of the protests. Now, Le Figaro, the right-leaning daily, calls it a human wave in the streets to denounce François Hollande's policy on the family. The protesters want the same-sex marriage law repealed, but they're also demonstrating against other more recent measures taken by the government, such as cuts to parental leave and family allocations, which they say are anti-family. And there are also the same ancillary issues that were protested last year, such as medically assisted reproduction and surrogate motherhood, a plan the government has already said they'd have no intention of introducing. Now, Le Figaro says the protest is, quote, shaking up the left as well as the right, worrying the ruling socialists and dividing the opposition. Now, the newspaper, in an editorial, calls on the right-wing opposition, the UMP, not to flinch on this matter as they have on so many others. Just as there are out-of-touch cliques on the left, there are on the right too. And Le Figaro says that these will no doubt be advising potential presidential candidates Nicolas Sarkozy, Alain Juppé, who is actually in favour of the law, or François Fillon, to be modern, to, quote, ignore the people because the people in their eyes are always wrong. And in short, it says that they're basically telling them to act like François Hollande. And it concludes, one should, after all, be allowed to point out that François Hollande is the most unpopular president of the Fifth Republic, and those who might be tempted to imitate him might be better advised.
What about the left-wing papers then? Because obviously they were largely in favour of these laws as well, weren't they?
Yeah, but Libération on its front page says it's a step backwards. And the left-wing daily investigates the movement which has impeded the socialists' social reforms and which now threatens to risk havoc on the right, a movement that has silenced dissenting voices within French Catholicism, it says, and has hijacked the debate on the family, which it says has been very vibrant within the church and in several other countries too. The paper also says the demonstrations, quote, false alarms hide a real target, which is France's gay community. And the Manif pour tous, as it is known, is a large group of people protesting not for a right, but against the rights of others. People taking their cue not from social or scientific truths, but from prejudices of religious origin to maintain discrimination against couples that are different from them. And it concludes, the Manif pour tous is fundamentally an anti-gay procession. People are worried about the encroachments on secularism coming from Islam. Well, here's one coming from Catholicism.
Now, the government's got an awful lot else to worry about as well, hasn't it? Of course, its efforts to cut the deficit, also to make savings.
Yes, the business paper Les Echos is alarmed at the fact that within Europe, France seems to be hemmed in by its own promises. Its budget plan is already raising murmurs in Brussels, as it has already fallen short 2 to 3 billion euros in savings on social security. The Paris daily Le Parisien looks at the allocations to local authorities, which are set to fall considerably, and that will probably force a lot of them to cut expenditure. This applies to municipal authorities as well as regions. They'll be forced to tighten their belts and could push some to go further into debt and or raise taxes. The pro-business daily L'Opinion says the French people are prepared to make efforts. It points to a poll where 93% of people wanted reforms to be undertaken. 65% say budget cuts are necessary, which leads the pro-business newspaper to say the majority of the French people are agreed that France is in trouble, that its social model is on the slide, and that the role and size of the state needs to be called into question. If people protest, it's not because the reforms are painful, but because they're poorly thought out, shared unevenly, and badly implemented.
Oliver's also pulled out an investigation by a French newspaper about survivors from a tragedy last year.
Yes, this is a report to commemorate the death last year, 1 year ago exactly, of 366 migrants by drowning off the coast of Lampedusa in Italy, a tragedy from which there are only 153 survivors. The majority of them have now found refuge in Sweden, where memories of the shipwreck continue to haunt them. Now, of course, this hasn't deterred thousands of other migrants trying their luck, more than 130,000 this year, according to Amnesty International, like Yacoub, a 21-year-old Sudanese national who says that France, when he got there, was not the promised land he expected. He says, I grew up thinking that in France you were given a home and sent to school.
Oliver, thank you very much. That's Oliver with the French
You're
newspapers today. He'll be back, of course, a little bit later on with the international ones. Now, we've got that Run Like the Wind challenge coming up for you a little